Wow, super excited today. Welcome to the Fuse Life podcast. This is episode 170, and my guest today has an amazing story, especially his past that's really linked to something in my dreams that he doesn't know about, which I will tell him about. Um, but Ed Rush is here today, and he has written multiple books, multiple bestsellers. He's an entrepreneur, he's an ex-fighter pilot, and he's a man full of energy. And I am really, really excited for this conversation. Ed, thank you so much for making time.
Joseph, man, it's awesome to be here. I'll tell you, you don't know this. We didn't tell you this. Most of the time when I go on shows, I get invited. The host invites me, or someone else introduces me or something. But this particular show, my team actually brought your YouTube channel to me, and my team. You met my team lead, Eamon. He's like, dude, you got to check this guy out. So we checked out your channel. That's how we got connected, right? We
Yeah.
actually reached out to you. So it's an honor to be here, dude. I love what you're doing. I love the fact that you're just mobilizing and catalyzing people for action. And I believe in taking action, man, for the kingdom. So I'm so glad to be here.
That's amazing. And just so you know, you're the first person who someone has reached out for that I felt in my heart I'm meant to
Yeah,
do it. So obviously some divine appointment going on here, which
yeah.
is great. Um,
That's awesome, man.
yeah. So Ed, for those that don't know you, can you just give me a little overview? What are you up to these days? Where do you stay? Who are you with? What's going on?
Yeah, good stuff. So the real sort of short background is I was a person that failed kindergarten. I don't like admitting that, but my daughter, by the way, I have a 6-year-old daughter. She just graduated from kindergarten with honors. So proud of her. Also realized how dumb do you have to be to, like fail that grade? Basics, colors, blocks, stories. But I did it twice. I always tell people that because the next part of my bio is I was a fighter pilot. So I flew F-18s in and out of combat with the Marine Corps, not recently, back in 1999 to 2008. And then I got out and started writing books and working with entrepreneurs. And I was very content doing that until God really got my attention. I was a believer at the time, but I just wasn't really walking in a way that I was listening to Him. God taught me a really simple system for hearing from Him about business, which I was surprised about. I didn't think God was all that interested, frankly, in the business entrepreneur space. And He really shook me up. And then through an encounter with a very prophetic person, which I'll be happy to tell that story, God really got my attention. I got rebuked, frankly. Next thing you know, I'm standing on stage teaching hundreds and eventually thousands of people, actually, eventually tens of thousands of people to hear the voice of God specific for their life and for business and money and for the relationships and for breaking addictions and for healing. And I was literally watching Christians, but also atheists and agnostics and Buddhists and Hindus and people from all walks of life having a life-changing encounter with the living God through a simple conversation.
Amazing.
And really, that's what I do. I teach people how to hear God's voice, His still small voice that is so present. Most people don't hear God, not because God's not speaking. He's the Word. He's speaking all the time,
Mm,
even now. And But most people haven't tuned their frequency to listen. There are plenty of reasons for that. I can talk about the physical, neurological reasons. I can also talk about the spiritual reasons. But I've got a pretty good track record, near 100% actually. When someone really engages with the process, they're going to listen to God. And if I've taught an atheist how to do it, I can teach you too. So yeah, it's a fun thing to see people really encounter the true and living God in a loving conversation. It's life changing.
that's amazing. And yeah, we got to go into all of this. But it's so exciting. So let's go back. How do you go from failing kindergarten to becoming a pilot? Like what happened there?
Yeah, so the kindergarten failure was early on. I was not the best. My parents, by the way, my dad was a NBA referee. So if you watch the NBA finals, like Michael Jordan, Shaquille O'Neal,
Mm,
back to like Larry Bird and Dr. J, and even up until like Kobe Bryant and those years, my dad was on the court with those superstars as one of the leading referees in the country. My
wow.
mom, at the same time, was a national championship basketball coach. She won 3 national championships in college as a basketball coach with this very small Catholic school. And so I grew up with these two champions, and I was the opposite, man. I was in trouble all the time. So yeah, failing kindergarten wasn't my best moment. I went to a
Mm,
school called St. Matthias. It was a Catholic school. I always thought that was appropriate because if you read the story of Matthias, like Matthias doesn't even show up in any of the Gospels. He was one of the apostles, as you
yes.
know, but he doesn't show up in Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. Actually, shows up in Acts 1. Judas has already offed himself. The apostles are like, "What are we going to do about this?" And they got the bright idea to find these two guys who've been with him the whole time, Matthias, and I think the other guy's name was Justus. And they said, "Well, let's like roll dice, and we'll find out which of these two we should pick." And I know that sounds very sacrilegious for me to say that, but that's about what the story's told.
Hmm.
And the dice went on Matthias, and I thought, man, that sounds like my story. I was like behind everybody, the last person picked in the draft, like, trying to
Wow.
figure out what life is all about. And then all of a sudden, the dice gets rolled and I'm chosen. I'm like, whoa, 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 wait a second. Now I'm with the big guys. And I do feel that way sometimes, Joseph, when I'm on a show like yours or I'm on somebody's big podcast, something like that. I thought, man, I got picked by one of the big guys. So that's kind of the beginning of my story. But yeah, I graduated from kindergarten eventually. Actually, I made it through college. That was amazing. And then I was walking through the cafeteria one day at my school. There was a guy standing there with the goofiest looking uniform I've ever seen. It was like a khaki shirt. It's all pressed, medals hanging off of his shirt. And he had these blue pants with red stripe, which I found out later was really important. And this dude was a United States Marine. And he looked at me. I will never forget. He snapped his fingers and he looked at me and he said, "Hey, you ever want to fly airplanes?" And I was like, "Hey, I actually do want to fly airplanes." When I was 11, my grandfather let me take the controls of a twin Cessna double eagle and let me take that airplane, two engines off of the runway at Mesa Airfield in Arizona. And I remember as I took off the airplane in that airplane and watched literally the ground leave and the airplane launch into the sky. I thought, man, I want to do this. This is really cool. And he was just an old kind of pilot guy. Got a toothpick in his mouth, kind of talk with a Western drawl. And so when that recruiter said, "Hey, you want to fly airplanes?" I was like, "Hey, I do want to fly airplanes." And I kid you not, dude, 3 weeks later, I was signing on the dotted line. I was off to boot camp the summer of my junior year in college, came back, went into flight school, and
Wow.
it turned out I was a pretty good pilot. Like, I mean, I wasn't the smartest tool in the shed, didn't have the greatest grades, I did okay. But what I really realized was flying an airplane actually is very simple. I always tell people you just really need to know three sentences. When you push the stick forward, the houses get bigger. When you pull the stick back, the houses get smaller. And when you push the little red button on the stick, all the houses go away. That's really all you need to know about flying airplanes. But yeah, I got into the military, started flying airplanes. I finished first in my class
Wow.
in primary flight school, first in my class at intermediate flight school, first in my class in advanced flight school, first in my class as an F-18 pilot moving into the squadron. And I showed up at my first squadron. Um, I mean, I guess I'll just be very transparent because I feel like I'm with a group of friends talking to your followers.
Yeah.
But I was really cocky. I was like not overconfident. I wasn't even just confident. I was very sure of myself. I had gone from failing kindergarten to really excelling in an area that I was clearly very good at. And when I showed up in my first fighter squadron, I thought I was, the second coming of Maverick from Top Gun, and I was about to find out what experience really looked like. When you join a squadron, there's 18 pilots typically in a Marine squadron, and we have a rank structure. There's like a colonel, a lieutenant colonel. You've got people who are in charge,
Hmm.
and there's a commanding officer. He's a lieutenant colonel. There's an executive officer, lieutenant colonel, then major, 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 captain, captain, first lieutenant, and I was all the way at the bottom of the rank structure. But in every fighter pilot, there's a second structure, which is who's the best pilot. And if you watch Maverick, like the first
Hmm.
Top Gun movie, you remember that was like all about who the best pilot is.
Yeah.
And we find out who the best pilot is in the most democratic way, which is we fight each other in airborne combat, simulated combat with simulated missiles, but real airplanes, real G, real fight. And when you fight someone, not only did you win or lose, but you also know how good they were.
Mm.
And I went out day after day as a young pilot, young, somewhat overconfident slash cocky pilot, and I went out day after day, and I got beat. I mean, I got beat bad. When you're in an F-18, if you're winning, you're looking out of the front because you're seeing the airplane in front of you as you're shooting them.
Mm.
Most of our weapon systems are forward quarter in the front weapon systems. When you're losing, you're looking over your shoulder. If you're watching this on YouTube, there's a helmet right behind me. That's my helmet that I actually wore in the cockpit. When you're losing, you're looking backwards, back towards that helmet. And when you're pulling 8, 7, 8 Gs and you're looking backwards, it's very uncomfortable over your head
Yeah.
and your body. And I was getting beat. I was getting beat. I was getting beat. And it was embarrassing. Actually, it was humiliating. And I decided, man, I'm going to do something about this. So every day we could go into the simulator and practice, but it was always booked. People always booked it, and it went by the rank structure, so we couldn't get in. But I realized that every Friday night it was empty because everybody was drinking at the club. And so every Friday night, dude, I went in there and I just drilled and practiced and drilled and practiced. And I'd practice doing a perfect turn, and I would practice my maneuvers, pirouette, doing these high turns and rollovers, burying my weapons without being able to look at them. And I would blindfold myself and find all the switches. And over the course of the next 3 years, I went from being the worst pilot in my squadron to literally one of the best pilots in the entire Marine Corps for one against one
Wow.
dogfighting. And I usually kind of just tell that story, just kind of kick things off to just say, look, when you come into topics that seem difficult or complicated, like when I talk to people about talking to God, there's people you and I know who are some of the most prophetic people in the world
Mm,
who have a daily conversation or even hourly, minute by minute conversation with God. And there's people I've talked to who have been literally walking with God for their whole life who've never heard from him,
mm,
not once. And I will tell you that I get questions from those people, but you know what's interesting? I also get questions from some of the most connected prophetic people in the world. Literally, I've had people that are in the prophetic all stars who have read God talks, done the exercises, and had massive breakthroughs in their conversations with God because the system is just so simple. And so I'm just here to tell you that if you feel overwhelmed or you feel like you just showed up at a squadron and you know you're the youngest person there, just kind of let Joseph and I hold your hand for a little while. Let's show you a way of a simple conversation with God. And the best news about it is God's really up for this chat. He's not hiding. He's not making it hard for you. He really wants to have a conversation with you because there's really true breakthrough on the other end of that.
yeah, man, that's so good. You know, I was doing some training with some guys in Iran who were part of the Sheep Among Wolves movement over there, and in 2017, I was looking through different church models, and I was kind of coming out of typical institution thinking, and that's a big thing that they do there is just training people on how to hear, obey, and see the fruit. You know, hear, obey, and
Yeah.
see the fruit. And I went through your podcast where you had that 7 day series, and I could see the same thing, right? Like, hey, just hear, obey, see the fruit. You know, the simplicity of the gospel and how Holy Spirit is so good at doing what he does. We've complicated it, I think, in the West, especially, you know.
Oh man, it's wonderful. So, you know, one of my favorite characters in the Bible is this character that shows up in Proverbs called Wisdom.
Mm,
And it's very simple. God says in Proverbs, like, if you want wisdom, you'll get wisdom. You just desire wisdom, and wisdom shows up. And if you want it, you'll get it.
mm,
And so I have this whole tool that's sitting behind me called the Wisdom Pyramid. I always use this when I teach people because I say, like wisdom is the best thing, and divine wisdom is the greatest thing that you can get. And the wonderful thing about wisdom, you know, we talk about the gifts of the spirit a lot, right? So we talk about healing, words, tongues, word of knowledge. Very few people actually talk about word of wisdom. Word of wisdom, I think, is one of the greatest gifts anyone can receive because when you operate in a word of wisdom, everything's very simple.
mm,
I mean, I'll give a word of wisdom to somebody. I work with a lot of business owners. I'll give a word of wisdom to someone, and they'll go, "Huh, why didn't I think of that? Oh man, it's so simple. Like they'll achieve a 10x level breakthrough financially on the most simple idea, and that's what happens when wisdom shows up. So just like you said, like the series that we created, the book that's behind me is called God Talks. Everyone who gets the book gets automatically they get a free series of audios. There's 7 audios. They're like 15 minutes long,
mm,
and literally you're asking God the same 2 questions for 7 days on 7 different topics, and it's so simple. In fact, I think one of the reasons why it's been so successful is it's just so simple. There's not a long, complicated thing. You break through the most important thing you can break through as a believer listening to God, which is you break through your inner critic. I will just
mm,
tell you the number one thing people always ask, how do I know it's God? And how do I know I'm not just talking to myself? Like the number one thing that gets in the way. Listen, I have atheists. It's crazy, dude. I'll have atheists who come to my event. Sometimes I don't even know why they would come to my event. My events are called God Talks Live. So I say like his name right at the beginning. But they're always very curious. I just give atheists a lot of credit. I know a lot of people have a view of atheists that they're like sort of angry, and that's true in certain cases. But I found they're very curious. And as long as you don't hit them over the head right in the beginning with some super hard religion, usually they'll do the exercise. And I know if I can get an atheist to ask God the first question, he's going to show up. I've
mm.
never seen it not happen. Usually the atheist person thinks that they're talking to their like subconscious at first, but about 3 minutes into the exercise, they realize something else just happened here. And so when God shows up, he always leads with love. That's why it's really important for me to tell people that God, I've done this with tens of thousands of people. I've certainly done it with myself. When I first did these exercises, I thought, man, God's going to be upset at me or disappointed, or he's going to tell me like, oh, really, like, you know, you could have done better. And there's all these inner critic things that are coming. And when you really hear God, you hear love. You always hear love. He may be encouraging you, nudging you a little bit, but there's always love. And so if you can get that inner voice, that inner critic out of the way
Mm.
and just allow God an opportunity to speak, your life will simply change. And I still do these exercises, dude. I've been doing them for like 7 years now. and I wrote the stuff. I'm doing them all the time, man. I'm telling you, I've more than just seven now. I've got all these audios, and I'll just put my headphones on and listen to them. The other day, my buddy got in the car, and I was listening to one of my exercises, and he was like, "You really do like the sound of your own voice, don't you?" I'm like, "Man, I just like the exercise. I'm just talking to God over here while waiting for you at the airport, you know." So,
Yeah.
so yeah,
Well, let's touch on this. So in that podcast, there's also music. There's high frequency music, right?
yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? Because there is a difference depending, like when you put some music on the background while you're meditating. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So good, dude. So here's the thing. I mean, big picture, I'll just kind of give you a framework because it's really important to talk about this, especially when we're talking to folks in the church. You use when you talk about your story about going to Iran, you use the institutional church. And just so you know, there's some wonderful, beautiful things that we have in the institutional church that we've just have given life to. And there's
Yes.
also some belief systems that 100 years from now will be like, why did we believe that? Like
Hmm.
that really set us back. And what's happened in the church is, in the 60s and 70s, the church saw Eastern medicine and it saw meditation and it saw breath work and it saw things like, some of the other things that people were seeing that were happening in the Far East. And the church said, well, that is no way. There's no way I'm going to even think about that because I could just like let in a demon. Now, just so you know, breathing, Adam was doing that long before Satan showed up. And in fact, it's interesting. The Old Testament, the Holy Spirit's name in the Old Testament is Ruach HaKodesh, which essentially means breath.
Mm.
In the New Testament, it's pneuma, which is just a wonderful word. Pneuma, that also means breath or wind. And so when God breathed into man the breath of life, breathed into man the breath of life, he actually breathed in God for the very first time. The first breath was breathing in life. It's
Mm.
just unbelievable. And so things like learning how to control your breath. They teach that to Navy SEALs, dude, going to combat. That is not, trust me when I tell you, when you teach a Navy SEAL box breathing on his way into combat, he's not letting in a demon. He's training his body for action.
Mm.
And so there are things, for example, like breath work, like learning how to properly breathe, learning how to learning how to control your conscious and your subconscious mind through breathing. I will make no mistakes by telling you that is a gift that God has given to His people to be able to train themselves, to be able to discipline. The right word of discipline, by the way, is train. It's not like anger. It's like training, right?
Mm.
It's like I do. I have two sons, right, 18 and 17. I've got two daughters. I train them in the way that they should go. I'm teaching them, disciplining them. And so when you learn to breathe properly, when you learn how to control your conscious and your subconscious mind, what you end up doing is you shift your brain frequencies. Now, there are five brain frequencies. Just so you know, this is not wooey wooey stuff. This is scientific stuff. I could connect. I literally have a band that I could put around my head. It's sitting right over there. If I put that band around my head, I can tell you down to a decimal point what my brain frequency is at this exact moment.
Mm.
And there are five brain frequencies. They go from essentially sound asleep to kind of in between awake and asleep to kind of awake to kind of like, hey, we're here just sort of talking to like I'm on a fighter pilot mission, high attention span, high theta. Okay. And so there's five different brain frequencies. As you learn to breathe properly, as you learn to connect your heart to the heart of God, which just so you know is all biblical. Paul said in the first chapter of Ephesians, I pray that the eyes of your heart would be enlightened. Okay. As you essentially learn to do that, what you do is you train your brain to modulate its brain frequency. Okay. Here's a little secret. There is a space. Do you ever notice that, like, just as you're falling asleep, sometimes you'll have this really great idea, or be reminded of something, or just when you're waking up, that little zone just between when you wake up, it's a really fresh zone. If you hear from God or you have prophetic dreams, sometimes there's like really special thing that happens right in that moment, or God says something to you or hear something in that real moment. There are certain places where I will just tell you, it's just easier to hear God's voice.
Mm.
Not just not because God is hiding or not because he's like trying to be secretive about anything like that. We live in a very distracted world, dude. I have two phones, you know what I'm saying?
Mm.
I got one for all my social media stuff. I got one for like me and my family. We live in a very, very distracted world. If you're watching this on YouTube right now, there's like 15 videos down the right hand side that you can choose from instead of this video. The entire world is designed to distract you and to give you permission to be on all those platforms for your entire life. And human beings were designed for things like long walks.
Mm.
Like I live here in San Diego, but downtown's 16 miles away, right? So when I'm going to go to a baseball game, I got to drive 16 miles. It takes me about 20 minutes. In the olden days, if I wanted to go down there, it would take me about 4 hours of walking, right? Because 16 miles is about 4 miles an hour. I'm going to do about 4.5 hours to get down there. Well, during that walk, you get into this sort of somewhat post hypnotic state where you're just sort of like, here we go, and we're just walking. And that's actually a really fresh, very, 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 very open brain frequency for God to be able to speak right in that sort of like zone right there. That's what we were created for. We were created for when the sun went down. We kind of went to sleep, the sun came up and then we woke up and we walked everywhere and we had an opportunity to see nature in a different way and we heard from God. Well, now we live in a very technically advanced age. If things are moving very fast, right? You've got news that comes in like from around the world. We never used to know what was happening like across the world, but now we do. And our brains have not fully adjusted to that, just in terms of our own growth. And because of that, God's still small voice is still small voice.
Mm.
So your job as you're just trying to listen to God is actually more like tuning yourself to his frequency and just being able to maneuver your calmness in such a way that you can begin to hear from God. And so I realized that simple breath work. Just I don't really talk about this very often. I don't call it meditation. The only reason I don't call it meditation is because there's people who are like, no, that is from the devil, And
Mm-mm-mm.
I'm like, I don't know, man. Like I understand that breath is important, because God said it was important in so many different ways. I understand your heart is really important because Paul spoke of opening up and illuminating the heart, and Jesus spoke of understanding and hearing from him from the heart. And those things are really important, and they're kind of lost in the church right now. We really like to throw stuff out the window that we don't understand. I like approaching God with great curiosity because there's so much stuff that we don't know. And I've got rules, by the way, for myself around curiosity and accountability around those things. But yeah, if you really learn how to breathe, it's interesting that second brain frequency. There's a sleep. This second brain frequency is called theta.
Mm.
And if you like, I never went to seminary. I went to like one seminary class, but the seminarians, when they're taking notes because they're scribbling really fast, when they write the symbol for God, it's actually the Greek word theta.
Mm.
That's like a symbol for God. I thought that's fascinating that this brain frequency where God seems to be able to just get in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of the training that I do is just teaching people, listen, we're going to breathe a little bit. It's not weird stuff. It's not woo woo woo. You're going to go in through your nose and out through your nose. You're just going to eliminate distractions. It's one of the most important things you can do. And then once you do that, you're going to open yourself up to some curiosity, and you're going to shut down your inner critic. You're just going to say thank you to your inner critic and say it's time for you to go away for about 10 minutes. And for 10 minutes, you're just going to write down whatever you hear from God. And when you take away the busyness of the world and you take away the inner critic, you create a very fertile field to be able to listen to God. And when that happens, your life starts to change. He starts bringing you some stuff. I mean, let me tell you, the first time I started talking to God, I didn't mention this in my like biography. 20 years ago, I was a cessationist, man. I was a very strong believer. I believed in God. I believed in the Holy Spirit. I believed in the Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Bible. I didn't believe in the work of the Spirit. I thought that ended in AD 70, which
Wow.
is kind of a strange thing to believe. But and then God started speaking to me, and I started listening. And I invited my pastor, good man, by the way, just wrong on this one issue. I invited my pastor to coffee. We were sitting at Starbucks. I have a cup of cold brew here, but we were sitting at Starbucks. Like the cup was still hot. And I said, I want you to know I'm talking to God. And he goes, I wouldn't do that. He goes, that could get really hokey. And I would tell people he was right about the second part. You know, the first part he was wrong about, but the second part is it can get hokey, man, because God will just come. He loves to have fun.
Yeah.
He loves to test your sense of, a sense of self. And he's very encouraging, very loving, and your life will change. And the lives of the people around you will begin to change. People will start to notice a difference. And there's nothing like it. I know if you're watching this, you probably want breakthrough in business or money or finance or in relationships, or maybe with your career, or maybe you're trying to figure out what your next step is. And you just want to know what your purpose is. Right behind me is this tool called Wisdom Pyramid. Right at the top is Divine Wisdom. The first step is always to ask God. The first step
Mm.
is always to ask God about everything. About everything. It'll change your life.
Man, you covered a lot there. Let me rewind back a little bit, right? Because I want to know when God came in the picture. And you're a fighter pilot. Is God in the picture at that time? By the way, when I was a kid, it was always my dream to be a fighter pilot, and that's what I was gonna say to you. That my dad was in the army, and for some reason, I always had this deep desire to fly jets and do
Yeah.
crazy things, but it never happened. It's happened in the spirit in different ways, but
Yeah,
yeah,
in the
so
spirit. That's awesome. Well,
mm.
I'd rather be a Marine and a warrior and a fighter pilot in the spirit than in the physical. So good job. You really truly are carrying God's mantle in the spirit. So thank you for your warfare. Um, so yeah, so when I was I became a Christian when I was 8 years old. So I've been a believer for a really long time.
Okay.
And I mean, I was, like a church kid, memorizing my Bible. I mean, I messed up a lot, so it wasn't like, kumbaya the entire time. But when I joined the Marine Corps, I was very devout. I mean, I read my Bible through every year. I was really serious about what I was doing. I thought I was the only person, honestly, dude. When I joined the Marines, there's 192,000 Marines. I joined the Marines. I thought there's 192,000 Marines and there's one Christian. That's it. I thought I was the only one going into some mission field. I found out I was wrong about that. It was crazy, dude. My first night at boot camp. If you've ever seen like Full Metal Jacket, Marine Corps boot camp is no joke.
Mm.
Okay, it is the hardest boot camp of all the militaries in the United States. The Marine instructors are really hard ass. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. They're really
Very good.
tough guys.
Yeah.
It is no joke. And I knew I was going there as the only Christian alive. So I had actually written like 10 or 12 Bible verses on 3x5 cards that I would just carry in my like little pocket. And whenever I needed a little lift, I'd take the card out, read the Bible, read the verse, and then put it back in. First night at boot camp. Everyone's in their rack, which is basically a Marine word for a bed. I'm on the top bunk of this two bunker. We've got 40 dudes in a squad bay. The drill instructor, who just got done yelling at us for a day, pauses his yelling and he goes, "Now it's dark, right? It's totally pitch black." He goes, "Now, here's what you can do. Every night, if you want to, one of you candidates, that's what we were called, one of you candidates can pray for the squadron." Now, he said, one of you candidates can pray for the squadron. Now, who wants to do that? Now, just so you know, this is not a story about my courage or bravery because I was like, there is no way. The first thing they tell you when you go to boot camp is don't volunteer for
Yeah.
anything. I said, there's no way. I'm kidding. I don't know. I care if this is a test. I don't care if this is like David in the lion's den. God's trying to test to see. Uh-uh. He goes, if anybody wants to pray, does anybody want to do that? It's like quiet. I'm not going to volunteer. I kid you not. Out of somewhere, I still don't know what this was or who this was. Out of somewhere, someone goes, Rush will do it. Now, just so you know, nobody knew. Nobody knew I was a believer. Nobody knew I had cards in my pocket. Nobody knew anything. I still, to this day, I think it was Angel that showed up at boot camp, right? Because nobody's supposed to speak. You're not even supposed to speak up, right? Somebody goes, Rush will do it. I'm like, what? Wait, what? Who just, And so he goes, all right, can it, Rush? Why don't you pray? And literally, next thing you know, I'm like, Lord, you just pray your blessing over, every night for 10 weeks, man, at Marine Corps boot
Oh,
camp.
wow.
It was awesome, dude. It was so great. So it was just God's way of just being like, I got you.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I went through boot camp. I actually led Bible studies all the way through like flight school and in my squadron. And then, yeah, and then I went through this real period of spiritual depression. I was walking, I was like really diligent as a believer, and I just felt like I'd messed up so much. And I felt like I was just disappointed in me, and I felt like my family was disappointed in me. All those were lies, by the way, just so you know. But I was disappointed in me, and it was just this really down moment. And I'll just say, like, if you study the Bible and you really pursue God, but you're not connected to Him relationally, and especially if you're not connected to Him conversationally, eventually you'll probably end up in the place that I was because you read enough, you start to feel like you started fall short. I mean, there's legitimately there's places in the Bible that are literally designed to show you that you fell short. And if you don't
Mm.
have the love of God the Father and the light of the gospel to shine into that space, it's very difficult to crawl your way out of it. And I remember waking up in the morning feeling like God was so disappointed at me and I had failed so many times. It was a true spiritual depression. It probably lasted longer than I even remember.
Mm.
But I remember right in the middle of that, I was desperately trying to find a way out. And I remember right in the middle of that, I went to a counselor's office. I didn't want to go to the counselor's office. I'd never been to a counselor before. It was me and this other guy with his assistant sitting in this room the size of a closet. I was sitting on a folding chair with a cup of, day old coffee and a styrofoam cup. And he and I are looking at each other like, who's going to make the first move? And this guy goes, "Well, Ed, I'm thankful you came today. I want you to ask God a question." And I was like, "Wait, what?" And he goes, "I want you to ask God what lies you're believing about yourself."
Mm.
And I kid you not, dude, I'm like looking around because I was like, I'm just gonna leave. First of all, I knew God wasn't going to speak to me because God didn't speak personally to people. And the second thing is, I was positive if he did speak, the first thing he was going to say is how disappointed he was in me or how much I had failed or whatever. And I wasn't ready for that. And so my plan was I was going to be like, I'm not feeling very good right now, and then I was just going to go down the street to the bar or whatever,
Mm.
and but I didn't. I stayed. And some of you have been in a situation like this before where you don't want to be there, but I decided I was going to pretend. So the guy asked me a question. I want you to ask God what lies you believe about you. I didn't have the courage to leave. And so what I thought I would do is I thought I'll ask the question and then I'll just pretend. I'll make answers up because, then I'll make this guy feel like he did his job or whatever. I wanted him to think he did a good job that day. So I said, "Okay, I'll ask, and I went like, "Oh God, what lies do I believe about me?" And much to my surprise and shock, out of the silence, he said, "You believe you're alone." And I was like, "What?" And it wasn't just, it wasn't an out loud voice. It wasn't a booming voice, but it was very clear who was speaking to me in exact that moment. That was not me. Uh, and in that exact moment when he said, "You believe you're alone," I was mentally transported. Some of you have had this experience before where you're one place and you're still sitting there physically, but all of a sudden you go so deep into a memory that it's like you're actually present in your memory. And I was in my memory. I was 6 years old. My parents were in the middle of a big divorce conversation. My
Mm.
mom was in a car. Back when I was 6, we didn't have seatbelts. We're just sitting in the back. I'm sitting in the back of the car. My mom's in the front. My dad's on the sidewalk. They're having this big argument, and the argument is over who's going to pay for their divorce. They're arguing over who's going to pay for my second attempt at kindergarten. And my mom gets so upset. She takes these application papers and she throws them out the window. Whoosh, like 8, 9 papers kind of bloom into the air and kind of float, back in the back of the towards the back of the road. And she starts to drive, and I go, "Stop!" And I jump out of the car and I start picking these papers up off the ground. And in this memory, I see myself say to myself, "Well, I guess you're alone now." That was
Wow.
literally the words I said to myself when I was 6.
Wow.
And now I'm in this counselor's office at like age 34, looking back on, or shoot, probably, yeah, about age 38. I'm looking back on 32 years of life and I'm like, man, I really lived that software program. Like that moment in time, I was sitting on the ground picking up those papers and I said, "I guess you're alone." That wasn't just a word that I said to myself.
Mm.
That literally was a word that I embedded into my subconscious mind that turned itself into a software program
Yeah.
that literally spit out the alone result every time I could. And so I had difficulty connecting with my wife and I had difficulty connecting with my kids and I had difficulty keeping good team members around. And it was like I had a revolving door of people because if you believe you're alone, you will constantly self-fulfill that prophecy over yourself.
Yeah.
And so when I look back up in the counselor's office, um, after going through that whole memory, the counselor looks at me again and goes, "Now, and I want you to ask God what's true." And let me tell you, he said the second question, I was ready to jump in. I was like, not playing make believe anymore. I'm like, whatever just happened was a real experience that the living God just showed up and did with me. And I said out loud, I go, "God, what's true about me?" And he goes, "You've never been alone, and I love you, and I'm proud of you." And in that moment, boom, back into the memory again. I'm back in the back seat of the car like I'm in a movie again. And all of a sudden, the papers go out the window, and I yell, "Stop!" And I get out of the car. And as I get out of the car, out of the left hand door of the car, out of the right hand door of the car walks Jesus, and he walks around to the back of the car, and I walk around to the back of the car, and I look down and start picking up the papers, and I look over, and Jesus. This is my memory. Keep in mind, this is my memory. Okay, I look over and see Jesus. He's picking the papers up off the ground, and we both get up and get back into the back seat of the car, and my mom drives away, me and my mama and Jesus. And I realize it's really hard to feel alone when it's you and Jesus hanging out in the car, right?
Yeah.
And so it's fascinating what happened in that one moment is not only did God heal a belief system, "I'm alone," and replace it with a new belief system, which is, "You've never been alone. I've always loved you and I'm proud of you." But what he also did, which is fascinating, is he took a memory of a true moment and he turned it into another memory of a truer moment. Literally, God gave me a more real memory of that situation. The original memory, believe it or not, was 100% accurate, but 100% faulty because it was missing a character who was there the whole time.
Mm.
And the new memory that God gave me, he literally overwrote the CD, with a completely new memory that actually gave me a completely new belief system, which actually completely changed my behavior. And
Wow.
so I always tell people, you look at the results in your life, and the results in your life are there because of actions, but those actions are there because of a way of thinking. And
Yes.
the way of thinking is there because of words you said to yourself. So if you want to reverse engineer your results, like for example, if somebody looks and they have the same experience I do, they have a hard time connecting. Or if someone looks in their bank account and their bank account balance isn't what they want it to be, there's a reason for that, and it's your actions. I
Mm.
know there's a lot of things external, but really it comes down to your actions. And your actions are there because of the way you think. And you think because of the things that you say to yourself. So the fact is, you can physically, neurologically retrain your mind with brand new thought patterns. And my experience is if you do that in companionship with God, you create bulletproof Superman level thought patterns that not only can change your life, but can totally change the world. And as you can
Yeah.
tell just from that story, like when I had that experience, it got me pretty fast on the path to wanting to help people have that experience too.
Yeah, man. Wow. Very significant. I'm sure a lot of people will relate to what you just said. I remember my own journey of that same kind of thing. And the orphan in me realizing that dad was there the whole time and I'm part of the
Yeah.
family now. So I know that your business philosophy is easy and light, which I love, by the way. That's my jam for life. So how do you go from fighter pilot, striving, make things happen to now resting in the finished work and enjoying this journey with God? What are some
Yeah,
things that
good.
you would say to people there in that bridge?
Man, what a wonderful question. It's interesting. So I was reading Hebrews 4, and I got stuck. Like, I don't know if it's ever happened to you before, but sometimes you'll be reading through the Bible and you'll hit a chapter and you're like, man, I could stay here for a really long time. And I stuck in Hebrews 4 for months, literally. I just months. And Hebrews 4 quotes Psalm 110, a lot of different places. But the writer of Hebrews talks about rest. And he or she or whoever wrote Hebrews talks about entering into God's rest and how Israel was actually given this amazing opportunity to enter into God's beautiful rest in this place called Canaan, but they wouldn't. And so God didn't let them. And he said, because of unbelief. And I really started looking at that story and I was like, what exactly is God talking about? Because I want to make sure whatever he's offering me, I enter into. So I went back into Exodus and I read that story. And it's fascinating. You know the story, so I don't have to like do the whole thing. But they're a year into the desert. They celebrate Passover, and Moses gets 12 dudes together and says, "Hey, I want you to go into this land and look at it. Tell me how things are, and then come back." And they come back with these grapes that are like bending the pole. They're like, "This is amazing," and they're like, "This is flowing with milk and honey," which I think sounds really sticky, but I get the analogy. And they come back and they're like, "Dude, this place is amazing." And then 10 of the spies go, "But the problem is." The people of the land are really mighty and they're giants, and we're teeny little grasshoppers compared to these giants. And then Joshua and Caleb, the story, are like, no, we can totally do it, let's go. But the 10 people override the 2 people. And the phrase that they used caught my attention because they said we're like little grasshoppers. We're just like little grasshoppers to these great big giants, you know. And God was really displeased with them enough to say, no, you're not even going to go. I'm not taking any of you. You're going to wait till your kids come, and then they're going to go in there. And then when you read Joshua, the book of the conquest of Canaan, those giants are barely mentioned. There's not even any really epic battles. They'll talk about them every once in a while, but they would talk about them like, and then Caleb took the giants out of the land, and then this guy killed these Anakim. And they're mentioned like an afterthought. In other words, it wasn't like a huge deal. They didn't have to like really strategize on how to get rid of the giants. They just went and took their land, got rid of the giants. And the grasshopper term was really interesting to me because I realized what God was offering in terms of coming into his rest required a view of themselves that they were incapable of with immaturity. God needed for them to see themselves as really, really big and really, really strong because they were connected to a really big and strong God. And they were incapable of viewing themselves that way. And they actually viewed themselves so low that God was so displeased with them that he wouldn't even let them go into their rest. And so what I started realizing was number one, God offers this wonderful thing called rest. Number two, everything is complete. I know this sounds like a science fiction movie or something, but God saw you from the God said that the lamb was slain from the foundation of the world. God saw the end from the beginning. Everything is already done. Literally, the entirety of human history is already complete. Your role in it is already complete. God saved you from the foundation of the world, and your destiny, what he has you to accomplish in the future. If you just looked into the future, you could see it. It's complete in Jesus. He's completed it with you. And when you know that, it takes a lot of the pressure off. You know what I mean?
Mm,
It helps you realize, wow, I probably am a lot bigger than I thought I was. I'm far more capable than I thought I was. In the church, we really like to like talk ourselves down. You know, I was on the phone with a guy the other day, and I was like, "Hey, man, what's up?" And he goes, "Oh, man, I fail every day." I'm like, "Dude, why would you lead with that?" You
mm,
know, I don't. I mean, sometimes I do, but sometimes I have pretty good days. Like, I'm not saying I'm sinless or anything, but I would never lead with I fail every day.
mm,
Like, what if my employees was like, I was like, how are things going on Instagram? And he's like, I screw up every day. I'm like, well, Ethan, you're fired. Find someone new. You know, like why would you ever say that? But we have this like ethos in modern Christianity. We have this ethos that we should like talk bad about ourselves, or we should talk
mm,
ourselves down, or we should view ourselves really, really low. And I think that's a wonderful thing to do as long as you're comparing yourself to God. Like it's great. Look, God is eternal and massive and huge and wonderful and almighty and everlasting and all knowing. Yeah, when you compare yourself to God, you should think of yourself as like really small. But when you compare yourself, to the world, you have to understand you have Jesus inside of you. Do you know how big Jesus is? That means you're really big. You know, it says that you're in Christ and Christ is in you.
mm,
This is unbelievable when you think about it. So Jesus said he's in the Father, right? So that means if you look at the big circle, there's the Father. Jesus said, I am in the Father, and the Father and I are in one. Then he says that you're in me, which means underneath Jesus, you're inside of the Jesus and the Father. And then you go one layer deeper. Jesus says, oh, I'm in you. That means you got the outer layer is the Father, then Jesus, then you, then Jesus. And then it says the Holy Spirit is in you, which means the Holy Spirit's on the other side of the sandwich. That means you've got the Father and Jesus on one side. You've got the Holy Spirit and Jesus on the other side. Can you understand how big this bubble is that I'm talking about here? And that's how he describes you. And believers are out there like, oh, I'm just a sinner saved by grace. I'm like, that's not even in the Bible.
mm,
You were a sinner. Yeah. And you were saved by grace. But to talk about yourself in the present and say, I'm a sinner, I'm just a sinner saved by grace, that's not in the word. That's not at all. God calls you a conqueror. God calls you a kingdom of priests. He says that you sit on his right hand. Can you imagine that for a moment? You're sitting at God's right hand. Do you know what that means? The kind of power and authority that you're vested with. And part of my thing is like, man, if we got that, like, dude, if we got it, if believers got that, just what I said, just understood how big we are, how powerful we are, how much authority we have in Christ and the things that we can do, we would literally change the world
mm,
in about a week. All the stuff that you see, wars and rumors of wars and issues and presidents and people are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe, hate that political party. That would go away if we stepped into our actual calling. The only reason that those things are still there all the time is that we haven't. So, like, part of my job, I know it's part of your job too, is to get people, I mean, to like say it nicely, to kind of kick people in the butt a little bit, to move them along, and to say, like, you are bestowed with great honor and God's calling you into something really great.
yeah. So have you had people not like what you have to say and not
Yeah.
like how you've shown up? And did you ever doubt you? Because it's not typically Christian, because you are provocative, you are a mobilizer, right? You're asking hard questions. You come from a line of work where it's about results. You can't just talk about it, show me it. And so you come into the space with believers, and it's like, all right, kingdom looks like something. It's not just theory, it looks
Yeah.
like something. So, how did you deal with all of that coming into deeper into the
Great.
space and sharing the message? Yeah.
Yeah, that's an awesome question, dude. And by the way, anyone who does what you do or I do will face criticism. It's just the nature. It's just part of the game. Jesus was perfect. I mean, he didn't do anything wrong, and he had some of the harshest criticism and all. I thought, man, that must have been harder. Honestly, sometimes when I get criticized, I'm like, yeah, they're probably right about that part. Like there's some stuff that I've said that I wish I hadn't said, And so, but like with Jesus, he was like, oh man, I don't know how to explain this, but I didn't do anything wrong. How do I even, so anyway, part of the, just I used to be I was a fighter pilot, man. So I like went into war and got shot at and stuff. But when I started writing books and building my business and stuff, I started getting criticized. Everybody gets criticized in this industry. But I will just say, kind of like between me and you and everybody else watching right now, it hit me really, really hard, especially in the beginning, back when I was in my 30s, young 40s. I did not deal with it very well. It just hit me. It always hit me, and I could always feel it like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. Like it kind of hurt, you know. And what I realized was, so there's really two categories of critic. There's the outer critic. That's the person who's making a horrible comment on YouTube, or sending you like something in the mail, or like, they're saying, I'm going to be the exposer and tell everybody about your horrible theology or whatever. And, uh, and I'm like, half of the time, just, with the exposer types, I'm like, yeah, just dig in, man, because there's some stuff I wish I hadn't said. So if you can find that so I can get, like half the time with the exposer crowd, I'm like, trust me, in the last 15 years, I've changed my theology on so many things. I would be happy if you go found the,
Mm.
um, anyway, it's a side point. So it was particularly challenged for me. So there's this outer critic category, these people that are out there criticizing you. And by the way, there's a reason why a critical person is critical. I feel compassion for them. It's usually because their mom or their dad were very critical people, or because they don't have a great view of themselves. And criticism just, is a really safe thing to do. It seems like it's not, but as long as you're being critical, you don't have to change yourself at all. You can always throw something at someone else.
Yeah.
It's very comfortable. It takes, actually, believe it or not, criticism takes very little risk. Taking action, putting yourself in a place where you're in the arena where you can, be shot at or killed or whatever, that takes risk. Putting your money on the line, launching a new business or a venture, writing a book, that takes risk. Criticism takes no risk at all. And so these people who are outer critics, they sort of sit there and lob spears. And it's important for you to know, when you're dealing with those critics, one of the names for the adversary is called the accuser. It's been my experience in spiritual warfare that the enemy will almost always begin their attack with accusation. It's the easiest for them. It requires no real forces. They can always just say things, and if you can bite on the saying things, then they can take you out of the game, and they don't even have to worry about you. And so there's this inner outer critic. But what I also discovered is there's an inner critic. There's that part of you. Everybody has this sort of like this sort of inner voice. Sometimes it's like shows up as imposter syndrome or something like that, where you look around and you're like, gosh, if people really knew the real me, they wouldn't really like me. And I realized over time, especially dealing in the American political structure, I was in a lot of different insider meetings over the last 10 years around Washington. And I would look at some of the most powerful people in the world and realize they still have that like inner imposter voice. Like
Mm.
they really do. Like even some of the most powerful people you'll ever meet are still sort of like self-conscious, or like, I hope that they like me. And I realized, oh my gosh, everyone has that. I thought I
Mm.
was the only one that actually had that. And so what really hits you is when the outer critic's words match what the inner critic is also saying, right? So if you're saying you're an imposter to yourself, and someone over here says, this guy's an imposter, if they say the thing you're saying to yourself and those two words partner with each other, it will take you out of the game.
Mm.
And so what I realized when it came to criticism is the first thing that I needed to do was to eliminate the voice of the inner critic. I was happy to hear God's word, and I was also happy to hear rebuke from him and correction. I have a group of people around me who I know, like, and trust, who have an open door to correct me on theology or prophetically correct me on anything that God brings their way. So I have people around me who I love and trust who can do that. Okay, but at the same time, I've put a big wall up for people out here, because I realized if the accuser can take me out just with words, I'm not going to be very effective on the battlefield. And so I put this wall up, and then what I would do is, it was the most fascinating thing, right? So what I would do is, when I received criticism, instead of responding right away, which is really easy to do, like, you don't know what you're talking about, is what I would do is I would pretend like I've got this like yellow pad of paper here. So let's say I when I first wrote my most popular book, but my first real popular book is called 21 Day Miracle. It's over my shoulder here. And think I have like roughly 1,500 reviews for that book. And like 7% of the reviews are 1-star reviews. So, that's like 805. It's a lot of bad reviews.
Mm.
And I remember reading those reviews and I'm like, oh my gosh, that it like hurts. You spend all this time writing a book and these people write a 4-second review. One guy literally wrote 1 star and then the word meh, MEH. I'm like, dude, that's it. I wrote a 50,000 word book. You wrote one word. And so when I started getting frustrated about those 1 stars, what I would do is I would pretend all those reviews are in this paper here. I would walk into God's throne, and I would hand it to him, and I go, you know what to do with this. I
Amazing.
said, look, if there's anything, I would say to God, if there's anything here that I need to know, you know what I'm saying? Like maybe there are some spelling mistakes or grammar mistakes that I should change, or maybe there's an idea in the book that needs to be refined. I actually want to know that. So I'm like, Lord, if there's anything I need to know, please let me know. But other than that, can you take it? And I literally would give it to God. Now, what happened was the strangest thing, because I was expecting, you know, because like, I mean, I read my Bible. I've seen some of the things God did. I read that story about Sodom and Gomorrah when he rained fire from the sky. Pretty, pretty cool right there. And I was like, there's some other times where, 189,000 troops who were surrounding Jerusalem all died in like one afternoon. So I was like, hey, God, I know you've done some of this stuff in the past. I just gave you 105 one-star reviews. You know what to do. And I thought maybe he would go smote some people because I thought that's a really good verb. Smite, smote. I don't know what the text tense is, but I'm like, could you smite some people for me? Now, what happened was, as I was having this prayer, is God started giving me a little bit of a different picture for these people. And I'll tell you a little vignette, which really changed my heart and my life on this. I do 3-day events, and the first day is powerful but very intense. People show up. There's people there that are believers who've been walking with God their whole life, and there's atheists that show up, and there are people that hear from God for the first time, and they're crying, and we're passing tissues. There's people who are receiving huge new downloads for their life. It's a huge day, but it's a big day. First day is usually like a 9 to 7 kind of thing, so it's a long one too. And I got back to my room. We were in this hotel here in San Diego at La Costa Resort, this beautiful resort in North San Diego. And my team had got me this huge suite, right? It had this big living room and like this huge bathroom and bedroom and everything. And I was like done with the day, ready to chill. And I picked up my phone, and one of my team members had texted me and said, "Hey Ed, don't worry about what that guy said over email. It was a great day." And I was like, you know, what did you have to send me that email text for? Like, now I got to go read the email. Okay. So I go read this guy's email, and I kid you not, dude, it's like I don't know how he wrote such a long email. And he was explaining why he was leaving the event and why he thought that what I was teaching was wrong. And he went on to criticize, like I had played a clip from the movie Braveheart. He went on for like 2 paragraphs to explain why if I play Braveheart, it offends all the women because, and I'm like, I don't think you know women like I know women. I think they actually like that movie. But he was very, very critical. And it was like, gosh, man, it was like such a blow at the end of the day, right? So, older man, it's probably about in the 70s. And so I was kind of walking around my room a little bit upset and frankly a little frustrated. And I go, oh, that's right. I need to bring this before God. So I literally walk into God's throne room. I bring the email in front of him. And I'm like, Lord, if there's anything I need to know, please let me know. Otherwise, you know what to do. You can smote this guy if you want. And what happened was the Lord actually brought me right into a vision. And all of a sudden, I saw this timeline. It was about 70 years long. And I saw this man right at the end of this 70-year timeline. And I looked back. And as I looked back in his life, what I saw was moment by moment by moment by moment. Every time this man was on the verge of a massive breakthrough, he was just there. Like every single time, he almost made it there. And it always takes risk to take that last step into breakthrough. As he was just about there, he literally retreated back into criticism. And I watched as he wrote letter after letter and email after email and text message after text message, literally throughout his entire life. Instead of getting his breakthrough, he went back into criticism. And for some reason, he showed up at my event again, probably after the same thing that God had wanted for him his entire life. And he retreats again back into criticism. And dude, as I'm watching this timeline, I am actually now moved emotionally, and I began weeping for this man who just criticized me. And I thought, how great is that, man? Like I went from reading that email and going, you don't know what you're talking about. You getting, like smote him, I went from reading an email to literally moved with compassion because of a person's failed destiny. And I realized when you really overcome criticism, not only doesn't it affect you, you actually respond the exact way Jesus responded to criticism, which is with compassion.
Mm.
Every single person he talked to, even the ones he rebuked, he had deep compassion on. And when I had compassion for that person who was who is critical, I was like, oh man. And then I saw all the areas that I was critical, in my life. I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry for all those times, Lord, like, but it just totally changes you. So yeah. And the last thing I'll say, super quick, maybe 20 seconds on criticism. The last thing I'll say is I started seeing it as a sign of success. Look, the most successful people in the world have this band of critics that just follow them around everywhere they go. And I started realizing, well, you know what? Some will, some won't, so what? Some will, some won't, so what, And I actually started seeing it as a sign of like maybe things are going right here. Like maybe you're pushing it enough.
Mhm.
You've heard enough of me now to know like I push the edges a little bit on purpose. But that's what I'm called to do. I'm called to break people out of this religious sort of um, sort of jail cell that kind of holds you down and break
Yeah,
you into this vibrance that Jesus offers. And sometimes that ruffles people's feathers.
yeah,
So,
for
but
sure.
it should.
So when you finished being a pilot and in that transition phase between what you're doing now and after being a pilot, you were writing some books on business. You got into business straight away. What
Yeah.
was going on in that time before
Yeah.
the
So,
God talks came in the picture?
yeah, super question, man. The questions are so much fun. Thank you for your research and your diligence. So yeah, I came out of the Marine Corps and I was just working with business folks. And I wasn't hearing from God. I was still a cessationist when I left the Marine Corps. I was very serious about my relationship with God. I was reading my Bible through every year. I had this little laminated sheet because I'm like super Marine guy. That was like my prayer sheet. Every day I would pray through this people. So anyway, I end up in this period of spiritual depression, and you heard the story about how I heard from God. That's probably 5 years into my business, maybe 5 6 years into my business. Prior to that,
Oh,
I'm
sorry,
doing
let
these
me
big
let
business
me
events.
just ask you a question. Sorry. So
Yeah.
what was the business? What were you doing at that time?
Oh yeah, yeah. So I was essentially working with entrepreneurs. So what happened was in 2006, I came out of the Marine Corps. I wrote a book. It's still kind of on the shelf back here behind me. That was essentially a book on how to become a fighter pilot. That book, I for real, all I wanted to do was make like a couple $1,000s to be able to buy a computer. That book turned into like a 7 figure or a 6 figure a year, about $150,000 a year business. I had CDs and products, and it was
Wow.
crazy. Like I learned how to market. I learned how to communicate. I learned how to use the internet. Then I launched another business that became another 6 figure business. Actually, it was with my dad. We were working with basketball referees. Then I was helping out some other folks launch products. Next thing you know, I'm making 7 figures, right? So 4 years into business, I'm in the 7 figure range. My fourth year in business was $1.2 million gross. And I'm moving like and learning. And like I've got other people that I'm helping in their businesses. And then I started speaking because people, when you start growing like that, people are like, hey, could you come to our events and speak? So I would speak. And every time I would speak, there'd be people who would come up to me and be like, "Hey, could we like take you to lunch so we can pick your brain?" And I was like, "Yeah, let's go to lunch so you can pick my brain." So I would do like these free consulting. I called them free lunch lessons. I would do like these free consultings. And I was like, well, that was a waste of everyone's time. So I started charging money for that. First time
Mm.
I charged 2,500 for like an afternoon. Then it was 5,000. Then it was 7,500. Nowadays I charge like literally like 47,000, 50 to $70,000 to do one on one with me. $25,000 for group programs. That's now, but not then. And I started literally charging for my time. This is when I'm still a believer, but not a moving in the spirit at all, right? And so then I have this moment where God begins to speak to me. And from there, I begin to have this developmental conversation relationship with God. About 3 years after that moment where I first started talking to God, I'm still doing big business events. I'm doing my own events now. I got 250, 300 people come to these events, and I'm teaching them real business stuff like positioning, branding, speaking, marketing, consulting, how to grow a business, how to market online, how to write a book, like real things, not wooey wooey, like think of it and it'll come to you like law of attraction stuff or whatever. Like I didn't like any of that stuff. I didn't like the sort of like, if you just believe it, it'll happen to you. And I'm like, not really. That's not exactly how it works. Like you gotta take action and stuff. And so anyway, I'm sitting in my chair, and so that verse where Jesus rebukes his apostles and he's like, can't you just tarry for me for 1 hour? Remember
Mm.
that verse about the in the
The
in
garden.
Garden of Gethsemane? And so I had heard that sermon that weekend, and I was like, I'll tarry with you for an hour. I could do that. So that Monday morning, I was like, I'm going to tarry with the Lord for an hour. So 8 to 9, I'd set aside. I'm going to pray for an hour and I'll pray for an hour. got my laminated sheet, and I started praying. And now I'm having conversations with God, but I started praying, and my mind wanders. Like 7 minutes into praying, and I'm like, you're so undisciplined. So I bring my mind back, and I'm praying again, and then my mind wanders again, and then I bring my mind back, and then my mind wanders again. Then I bring my mind back, and it happened like 3 or 4 times, and then all of a sudden, the fourth time, I go, "Oh my gosh, that's not me, that's God." And I realized the person bringing this business idea, I was thinking, my mind was wandering to a business deal that was happening that afternoon.
Okay.
And and I realized, oh, wait a second, that's God. That's God who just brought me. So I bring it into the conversation. Next thing you know, God's giving me deal structure. He's giving me the price for the deal. He's giving me the questions to ask the person on the phone and later on and the things to tell them. And the crazy thing is when you do business with God, he works it out for everyone's favor, right? So he's not just giving you intelligence to like crush the person. He's actually giving you a great deal for everybody, right? So
Hmm.
he's giving me the price, which is more than I thought it was going to be. And I get on the phone, working it through. Next thing you know, I'm closing like a 6-figure deal on the phone from what I just heard from God in the morning. And I'm like, oh, dang, this is amazing, you know? So I started bringing God into my business decisions, like almost every single decision. I kid you not. Nowadays, it's down to when to post, what to post. Like we ask God a question. Everything we do, we start by asking God. That's not the only step. We get good wisdom and everything, but I'm just saying that's what we do now.
Yeah.
Back then, it was just me in my chair and my little journal. They're all sitting back here in my old journals. And it was just me sitting there in my chair. So I'm doing this dude for like 2 or 3 years. I'm not telling anyone about it because look, I don't talk about stuff like this. Remember, I'm the guy that teaches real stuff. They all know I'm a Christian, but I'm not about to teach people like I'm sitting in my chair and I'm hearing from God about my deals. That was not who I was. And I had a prophet. Dude, this guy was, you know the difference, right? As you're watching this between a prophetic person and a prophet. This dude was like a South African dude. He came to
Can you
me and he
name him or
goes,
no?
he knows who he is. His name is Melvin Pillay. Melvin comes to me and he goes, I have a word from the Lord for you. And he points his finger into my chest and he goes, the Lord says, cursed is the one who withholds grain. And when he said the word cursed, that's a verse in Proverbs, right? Cursed is the one who withholds grain, but blessed is the one who sells it. When he said cursed, my heart dropped out of my chest, dude. I was like, what? And I thought I was charging too much money or, not giving enough or something like that. And he said, you have a way of asking God about your business and you've never told anyone. And I was like,
Mm.
oh, dang, guilty as charged. And then I looked at him and I said, yeah, but you don't understand, man. I don't do it. Just, if any prophetic person says something to you and the next thing you say is you don't understand, that might not be the right response. Uh, I said, you don't understand. I don't teach that stuff. I don't do wooey wooey. And he's like, well, the Lord is encouraging you to do that. I said, all right, fine. So the next event, I had 250 people there. And I said to them on the second day, I said to the audience, hey, tomorrow morning from 8 to 9, I'm going to do an optional session. I'm just going to show you how to ask God questions about your business and get answers if you want to. And dude, I thought like 12 people would show up. 249 of the 250 people show up in this room to do this optional thing with me. And just so you know, there's Christians there, but there's agnostics and atheists and Hindus and Buddhists and skeptics and people who pretend to know what they believe in but don't. And at the time, I don't believe this anymore. At the time, I had been taught that God only speaks to his people. Like I
Hmm.
don't. Some people have been taught that. Just God can speak through like a donkey or whatever. He can talk to whoever he wants to. That's not his rule. That apparently was our rule. But I thought that at the time. So I remember as people were walking in, I started praying. I was like, Lord, I know you have this rule about not speaking to certain people, but it would be really great if you like overrode that rule today because I got a lot of people expected to hear from you. And boy, did he show up. 3 minutes in, we start the music. People do the breathing. They start asking God questions, the same questions that I've taught in the book, same questions you heard me say from the counselor's office. And like 3 minutes into this exercise, man, people are weeping. There's tissues. We didn't even have tissues. I didn't even know. I didn't even know I need tissues. We're trying to run through the hotel to try to bring tissues in. And there's stories in this book about the breakthroughs that happened that day. Atheists that heard from God, people whose lives completely changed, their finances completely changed simply because of a conversation with God. So it took me doing it once for me to be like, okay, I got it, Lord.
Wow.
And so we started making it the feature of I stopped making it a optional session, and I literally made it the feature of our business events. 3, 4 times a year we do a big event. We've got one just a couple weeks from now. Anywhere from 250 to 1,000 people come to these events, and 5 times during the event, like the way it typically works is there'll be a session in the morning where there's some teaching, then there'll be an exercise, then there's a session in the afternoon with teaching, then exercise. Next morning, teaching, exercise. There's 5 times during the events normally where we will put this music on for 20 to 30 minutes. There's an exercise that literally will walk someone through. I'll you've been through the 7 exercises, but during the events we go really deep. We have an exercise called 1,000x where people literally expand the way that they think, so God can implant in them a new mindset for their purpose.
Wow.
There's an exercise called attracting abundance where you literally reset the way that you think about God's abundance so that you can receive what God's already sending to you. There's an exercise called perfect customer where literally you download from heaven your ideal customer. We've got one on marketing plan. We've got one on time management. The idea is, Galatians 3:3 says, Paul says, if you begun by faith, but now you're becoming perfected by works.
That's
My
right.
experience is that most entrepreneurs start by faith. Most entrepreneurs are like, I want to serve God.
Mm.
But when it comes down to the decisions, even the detailed decisions of the business, they're going to kind of probably make those on their own. My experience is that God is intimately involved in the intimate decisions of your business. And if you're willing to ask him the details, he'll tell it to you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's what we do. We've been doing that for years now. We've seen so many people whose lives and businesses have changed. I literally have miracles, cancer healings. I mean, there's stuff that like you wouldn't even believe happens at business events, all because of this little message, of talking to God.
Man, that's amazing. I'm conscious of time. I want to honor your time. There's so much I want to keep talking to you about. But let's hit this. I got two main ones I'll hit. So one is money. I'd love for you to talk on this subject because obviously believers are so polarized when it comes to money and are afraid of it. And in most believers that, especially before I got into this kind of business, 2012, 2013, I began a fitness business, and all the people around me, their conversations around money were just broken conversations, you know. So can we touch on that first, money and abundance, and what that means to you and me?
Right. It's an awesome topic, dude. One of my favorites. It affects the church more, I think, than any other topic, frankly, because this is a moment in time where God is trying to give his people resources. We are in a time that you've probably heard people talk about. You might describe as the great wealth transfer,
Mm,
where God is literally taking resources and handing it to his people. And at the moment, quite a few of God's people are handing them back. So talking about money is one of the most important things that we can do. And I get very serious about this topic. I mean, I still joke around a little bit, but I'll just tell you as I go into this topic, it's okay if you don't agree with me. I would just encourage you to listen with an open mind. Okay. First things first. I was a person who was affected deeply by my church at the time's unbiblical view of money. Now, it sounded really, really biblical. I grew up thinking that money is the root of all evil. By the way, that's not a Bible verse.
mm,
That comes from the pit of hell, smells like smoke. The verse in Second Timothy says the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, not money is the root of all kinds of evil. I was also taught that when I had money, if I had money, it would turn me into a bad person. I was very clearly taught that doctrine. And a lot of people who grew up in church have loosely been taught that money is kind of okay, but like it's going to probably cause problems in your life. And so what I did when I went into business, dude, I was like for a while, my first couple of years, I was essentially a Grand Central Station for money. I would make money and it would just kind of disappear down the tracks. And I was like, dude, something's wrong with this. So I went back to the word, went back to the basics. I literally went through the book of Proverbs. I put a little dot next to every single verse that talks about money or wealth. There are a lot of verses, by the way. Things like the blessing of the Lord makes one rich and he adds no sorrow to it. And I was like, oh, wait a second. I was told if I got money, it would ruin my life.
mm,
But this verse says, the blessing of the Lord makes you rich. The other word it uses is wealthy. It means you have a lot of money. There's not like a alternate spiritual translation of that verse. It means money. The
mm,
blessing of the Lord makes one rich, and he adds no sorrow to it. I thought, wait a second. There's a way to get wealthy without sorrow? You're telling me there's a way to acquire money so that you're not evil all the time, right? There's another verse that we were just referring to. The sinner's wealth is laid up for the righteous. You're like, oh man, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children, but the sinner's wealth is laid up for the righteous. This is amazing. And so what I realized when I read through Proverbs was that there's not two categories. There's not evil rich people and good poor people. There's actually four categories. There's evil rich people, good poor people, good rich people, and evil poor people. I didn't realize those other two categories existed. I went back all the way into the word and I started reading things like, wow, you're blessed to be a blessing. I never even caught that the first time that I went through Genesis. And then I realized that Abraham was really rich. Like when he came back from Egypt, he was loaded. Then his son was loaded. Then his son was loaded. Then those other 12 guys, they had it, dude. Joseph was second in command of all, like every single person down the line when you start seeing that. And then at the heyday of Israel, you've got Solomon, where they're like, silver was nothing. We didn't even think count silver. Like that's how loaded Solomon was. And you see, when a people walk in God's ways, they're blessed, not just spiritually, they're blessed physically with wealth. And
Mm-hmm.
when people are called by God, they eventually will acquire wealth because the sinner's wealth is laid up for the righteous says that the natural transfer, not just now, but the natural transfer of things should be from ungodly people to godly people. The fact that our world is populated with the Forbes 400 top billionaires, most of them being ungodly people, is a judgment on the church. Just so you know, it's because we have not taken the ground that God wants us to take. Okay. And so I'm really serious when I talk about this topic because God's people need to get it through their heads that this is a really important topic.
Mm.
Now is a time, what I see God doing right now is giving seed. I see him giving seed to his people. If you understand farming, which you probably do, you plant seed. You don't give away seed, you plant seed so that seed grows and turns into things that you can give away, that you can reinvest, that you can eat, that you can sell. Okay. It's interesting the verse I said before about that prophetic rebuke. That verse, cursed is the one who withholds grain, but blessed is the one who sells it. I think it's interesting that Solomon, even in the Proverbs, he didn't say blessed is the one who gives it away. And
Mm.
surely you're blessed if you give. He actually said blessed is the one who sells it. I thought, our current teaching in most of the church, it doesn't exalt sales.
Mm.
Like you don't actually hear very often, it's getting better, just so you know, a lot of the pastors are getting on with this, but a lot of times you don't hear people go, hey man, if you're out there selling insurance, and if you're out there selling window cleaning, you're a blessing. You're so blessed because you're blessing the people who you're selling it to. That's true, by the way, according to that verse. You won't almost never hear it, right? You kind of hear it like, it's kind of a necessary evil or whatever. But the real work of the church is missions, and like I don't know because I have business people who have pest control companies that I see changing people's lives more for the kingdom than a lot of missionaries that I've
Mm.
supported over the years. Nothing against those missionaries, but like some folks are on sabbatical for a year. My pest control guy's still out there crushing it. And and it's like we're in this world where God wants to give his people resources. I always ask people, what would it be like if the top 400 Forbes 400 richest people in the world were all Bible believing, conscience driven people who loved God and walked with him on the daily? Like, what if those people woke up every morning hearing from God, like, what do you want me to do today? The world would change, boom, overnight. So, governments aren't going to solve the world. Governments moved way too slow to change anything.
Mm.
Nonprofits are not going to change the world, okay? It's going to be business owners and entrepreneurs taking good ground for God, okay? And I know a lot of people when they hear me say taking ground, they don't like that kind of talk or theology. I'm only using biblical terminology. 1 Corinthians 15 says he will reign, Jesus will reign until he has put all enemies under his feet. The last enemy is death. So what I'm talking about is nothing more than what I believe is a biblical mandate that started with the Great Commission and ends at Revelation 22. And I'll just tell you that if you choose to walk down this path, I feel like God will bless you because he's looking for people that he can invest his wealth into, that he can trust. Okay. And doesn't mean you have to be perfect. I got a lot of stories I can tell you that would describe that I'm not, but you do need to be willing to raise your hand, just like Isaiah said. The Hebrew word is hanene. That means, here am I, send me. I'm right here, God. I'm right here. Here am I. All of the Old Testament patriarchs said the exact same word. Abraham, where are you? Hanene, here I am. Here I am. All you need to do is raise your hand and say, here I am. By the way, a good start. You got a comment section on this YouTube channel. You write that word, write it right in there. Hanene, here I am. I'm serious. Sometimes the act of just taking action with your hands right
Yeah.
now. I'm not saying like wait till the end. I'm saying right now, go to the comment section and say, here I am, God. Here I am. It'll also tell me and Joseph that you made it to the end of this interview. So we know who the special people are. So anyway, over to you.
Yeah. Well, man, I do have a lot of questions. Maybe there's a part two. I don't know if you're open to that. And that's strictly business. That would be a great conversation. Strictly God's
Yeah,
business,
the answer for you is always
Uh,
yes, man. So let's do it.
man,
I'm for real interested. It's been a really fun conversation.
there's so much gold in you, right? And people like you who I'm not sure if typical ministry has recognized, you know. There is so much there that you have to give the body to be mobilized that I'm excited that it's becoming more common now, you know, and it needs to be more common. But let me ask this. So you have this like risk-taking nature, right? This fearless execution mindset. Is that something like what would you say to someone who's afraid all the time of taking risks or jumping, or they have an idea from God, but they don't know, they don't want to leave their job, their 9 to 5? Any advice for these people?
Yeah, such a good question, dude. I love it. So first of all, risk taking is a godly endeavor. I'll just say, I mean, I love Jesus' description of him and the Father in John 14. Jesus said, I am the Father are one. We're in perfect seamless union. If I was reading, I think it was the Passion Translation. It says we're in perfect seamless union, you know? And I thought, oh, that's a great description of what I would like to be with the Father. I'd like to be in perfect seamless union. In other words, if the Father's moving right, I'd like to move right. If the Father's moving left, I want to move left. If the Father's got his eye on this person over here who's at my event, I want my eye on that person over here at this event. And so I've endeavored to walk that way. I haven't done it perfectly. I'm better than I used to be. But that's my goal. And as I became more in seamless union with the Father, what I realized was, well, he was calling me to take some more risks. And I thought, man, that's not a quality that I was taught growing up in the church. Just, I love the church, go to church, support the church. I mean, I'm a member, like everything. I just know there's some things that we need to do better. And just, I've been critical of some of the things with the church during this episode. It's important for you to know I look at this like a debriefing fighter pilot. Okay, I'm not standing outside the church telling you all the things that are wrong. I'm standing inside of the church saying, "Come on, we can do better. Let's go,
Hmm.
guys. Let's do this."
Hmm.
Right? We made mistakes when we did missions as a fighter pilot. I would say, "Come on, guys, we can do better. Let's go try this again." Okay, so I'm in the inside of the church, encouraging the church, "Hey, let's do better." But I was not taught risk. I was taught, "Hey, you got to be careful and be a good steward and all these things." And like I was like never ever taught risk. But then I started looking. I've got a friend of mine who's an entrepreneur who about a year and a half ago was worth $300 million, and God asked him to put it all back on the line again. And I was
Wow.
like, oh my gosh, I don't know. I mean, like I mean, I've literally put hundreds of thousands of dollars, probably three, four, $500,000 risking in endeavors that I felt like God was leading me to, and I
Hmm.
was being obedient with. But when he said 300 million, I was like, dude, I don't know if I could. And I don't think I could right now, but honestly, like maybe by the time I had that, I could do it
Hmm.
because faith grows as God delivers, on his promises. And I told him, I said, you are the most risk averse person I know. I said, I think there's such a godly aspect to that we've lost.
Hmm.
And here's the thing. If God gives you $15 and you get $15 and you're like, ah, I finally made it. Like, I got everything I need. Well, then too much money for you is like $15. But if God gives you $300 million and you're willing to put that back on the table, you can be trusted with $3 billion, $300 billion, $300 trillion, whatever. And so what I realized was I wake up in the morning, I've been broke, dude. I've been in my life, I've been so upside down before several times. I mean, I've literally been at hundreds of thousands of dollars in business debt before, like way upside down, trying to figure out where I was going to get even the money to pay for the credit card bill. And on those times, I woke up in the morning and I was like, "Oh, Jesus, I need your help today. Come on, God, let's go. We got to do this today." And I've woken up literally with millions, in net worth, like millions. And on those mornings, I was like, "Oh, come on, God, come on, Jesus, we can do it today." And if you're waking up going, oh, just leaning on you, Jesus, come on, let's go. We could do this every day, no matter your financial situation. You can be the kind of person that God can entrust with wealth. And it comes down to your willingness to risk. I think, first of all, it's oh gosh, I don't mean to make light of this, but in one sense, money is just kind of made up.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like our world systems are simply based on a bunch of paper and a belief in what that is worth.
Hmm.
I do some crypto investment. People who are critical of crypto are like, "Hey, it's not even worth anything except what people believe it is." And I'm like, "You mean like the United States dollar
Yeah.
or any other your like anybody else's currency? It's only what people believe." And so when you look at money and you realize, "Oh, you know what? It's just kind of like a made up thing that we
Hmm.
all can use, but God can provide in any way." And when you're willing to step out there and take risk, I really feel like God can bless you. Last thing I'll say about that is when I started studying biblically the idea of risk. What I realized was not only did all of the great stories in the Bible involve massive risk. I'm talking like Abraham moving out of Ur of the Chaldees to Canaan, eventually back down to Egypt and back up again. I'm talking about him trying to sacrifice his son. I'm talking about David walking out there with a bunch of stones and the sling. All these amazing stories involve this first huge step of risk. And David said, "You come against me and in your name, and you to revile my God, but I come to you in the name of Yahweh, right? The King of heaven and earth." When he said that, he could have died, you know? We
Mm.
always take for granted that fact of that story, like, man, David ended up winning, but that took enormous risk. But finally, and definitively, what I realized when I was going through the Bible looking at risk is I realized that the biggest risk ever taken in the history of the universe was when God the Father sent his son Jesus to planet Earth. You have to understand, he could have sinned. He had to have been able to sin for it to be an effective sacrifice. It says that he was perfectly obedient. Well, you can't be perfectly obedient if you can't fall.
Mhm.
And so, as Jesus was walking on planet Earth, you have to understand there was a chance he could have given in. There was a chance that he could have fallen. Now, thank God he didn't. He's like, the best. But there was a risk. And when God sent Jesus, there was a risk. I know theologians have a big issue with me saying that. I've been saying
Mhm.
it for years. I've literally been saying it since I wrote it in a book in 2012. But when you see how God modeled his rescue operation, you realize, man, if he could have risked everything, like that's everything, everything disappears. If Jesus falls, what happens? I don't even know what happens to the Godhead. I mean, it's like crazy. So if he could have done that, I should be more than willing to put a few $100 million on the line to see what happens, And just
Mhm.
my buddy, he wasn't called by God to give the 300,000. He gives some of it away, just so you know. He was called to reinvest quite a lot of that into some massive grand ventures that have kingdom mindset on top of them. So
Wow.
super fun.
Amazing, man. Hey, I'm gonna put all of Ed's links, well, a few of them that he wants me to, in the caption, so you can check all of this out. But is there anything that you want to just share that you're doing currently that you'd like people to go to? Any of the books in particular, or coaching courses, anything like that?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. The book over my shoulder is the book. It's called God Talks. The website is the easiest website to remember. It's God, the word God plus talk. So it's GODTALKS.com. When you go there, you'll see a link to the book that takes you usually right to Amazon. If you're in New Zealand, you can reset yourself to there. If you're in Australia, you can do that. If you're in the States, you can do that. By the way, if for some reason your book does not show up in your Amazon store, please let us know. Occasionally, from time to time, one of the more international stores doesn't have inventory of the copies, and it is helpful for us to know so that we can help Amazon better serve you. The book's also available on Kindle and Audible. Um, I think it's the greatest book ever written. I tell people I may be biased, but that doesn't mean I'm not right. I'm only partially kidding about that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of books that I like, but it moves fast. There's some fun stories. If you like the interview, you'll like the book. And then what it really does is it takes you into a process. It teaches you in the beginning how to train your mind. That's a really important first step. It doesn't make sense to do with spiritual platitudes if you don't actually get it done on planet Earth. And so you talk about how to train your mind, and then it leads you through 7 exercises where you will have 7 separate conversations with God, 15-minute conversations with God that will totally change your life. The book on Amazon is anywhere from 15 to $20, depending on how Amazon prices it. It's a very good deal. And then the audios are free though. They're completely my gift to you. I have a downloadable journal that you can write your answers in. I've got the audios. We've got all the little exercises in the book for free as well. That's all free for you. You'll get the link as soon as you get to the book. You'll get the link where all the bonus audios are. And yeah, I'd love to hear your story. I mean, my team pretty much lives and breathes off of people's breakthrough stories. So reach out to us, let us know, jump on our mailing list. We'll let you know when we have events coming up. Those things are life changing. Become part of our community. But just start with the book. It'll be fun. Even if you just read the first chapter, it'll change your life. It really will, and you'll have a blast. And Joseph, I just want to honor you. What you do is really life changing. I can just tell you, I'm friends with some of the biggest names in the terrestrial Christian TV world,
Man, I love
and
how you put that.
yeah, like the actual, like real, like you know what I'm saying, like CBN and the 700 Club and TBN, like the real ones, and I love those guys. But lately, I've been telling them a lot about you and what guys like you do, because it used to be if you wanted to watch Christian programming and get inspired, you had to turn on your TV and find one of those channels. But now there's really great content like what you're doing. This is why we reached out to you, because I would just love what you're doing, and the kind of people that you can reach through things like YouTube or Instagram and TikTok. It's extraordinary, man. I just want to honor what you've done and the following that you've built. My prayer for you is that God would bless you, not 100 or even 10 times, but that he would bless you 1,000 times, like what Deuteronomy 1:11 says. Moses said, "May God bless you 1,000 times." My prayer for you is that the number that you see on your viewership underneath this video right now, my prayer is that God would actually add 3 zeros to that and an extra comma, that he would bless you 1,000 times. I feel like you've earned the right to an audience that has real massive grit, and you're building it. I know you are. I'm just asking God to accelerate that. So
Yeah.
it'd be super
Wow.
fun to see you grow like that.
Man, thank you. I appreciate that. And just want to say I had a blast too, just this conversation. It was awesome. And I love who you are. I just want to honor that, the record you're bringing on the earth, your transparency, your vulnerability. That's a real thing. I think it's super necessary in this time, and I do hope we do another one. And I'm looking forward to being at one of your events and continuing this friendship. So thank you so much for being on, man. This was awesome.
Awesome, dude. It was an honor. Appreciate you, pal.
Yeah.